Well, good morning. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Avignone.
uh,
Sarah Sieg
I
Avignone.
feel like now you're changing again
No.
for bringing you Ascended World for this week. So we're because we started talking and we figured we should start recording. So actually, this is a good topic, a good place to start because we were talking about there's this abundance of not only people who are transitioning, but pets are just going in waves right now. And I had that. So I had that last year where I had three. I had two cats and a dog go last year, which is so funny to think about. That was feels like it was 10 years ago now. And Sarah, we were just talking about because she just lost her third pet in the past 2 months.
Yeah, started at the beginning of October.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was 2 cats and a dog.
Yep. Me too. That was mine last year too.
I know.
So weird. Stop. We gotta stop.
Yeah.
So, and many have been asking, what's with all the deaths? I don't know. There's a lot to talk about today, but this is just a good place to start, I guess, because when we start looking at everything as a message, then the question to ask is, well, what's that message to me? So, Sarah started talking about what she feels, each of those animals represented to her. So if you wanted to reiterate, that would be great.
Well, I guess it just hit me this morning, and thinking about them all, the part of me that I had chosen to reflect back to me. My dog was always scared of everything. So I really saw that he represented my fears, and that once I accomplished or overcame or embraced those fears, and allowed that piece of me to come back home, that he no longer needed to externally represent that. And the same with Pequeña, my cat, that you had to beg her to eat, and it just seemed it wasn't worthy to be petted or anything like that. And that was the worthiness piece that I welcomed back home. And then BC, she was self-care. She just didn't have self-care.
Yeah, I know.
And
you said she was a hot mess from early age.
She really was. She was just a mess. So, and I've welcomed that back home. So it seemed that each of them were a piece that I had acknowledged and addressed, and that, they no longer needed to represent that for me. And that was such as sad as I was to have their external or their 3D version leave, it's like it's a celebration for me from the perspective of, they no longer have to represent that for me, that they have the freedom to then go on and
Be them.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what many don't so we get so attached, and it's really interesting is, yes, of course we're sad because we get attached to our pets and stuff. And the more we go in consciousness, the more we recognize and know that they're going to be with us. I mean, my animals who've transitioned, they come randomly all the time. In fact, yesterday, interestingly enough, I was doing my meditation, and Minerva came in, my alive cat. She came in, and she always likes to sit I always have a pillow sitting on my lap when I'm meditating on the floor, and she'll come in, climb up on my lap and curl up and, fall asleep with me, meditate with me. And so she came in, and she came in when I was already really deep into it. And she started climbing up onto my lap, but she stopped, which was really weird. I could feel it, I'm way out there, and I could feel her stop. And she sort of was moving side to side, she was trying to figure out how to get around something. And then I realized I felt like there was a weight already sitting on my lap. It felt like she was already there. And I realized, oh, Merlin's sitting here today, because Merlin, who's passed away and a transition cat, used to sit on my lap all the time when I meditated. when I was with him, and I was like, "Oh, thank you for joining me today." But it was really irritating Minerva because she couldn't figure out how to get, even though like in the physical there really was no physical cat there, so it was really interesting that he popped in. But they do
Yeah.
energetically if you allow that open, and not only that, but it's a much freer connection when they can pop in as themselves energetically, because then they're not limited to reflecting to you what it is they're here to reflect. And that's what many
Right. Yeah, it's that more authentic self that they're allowed to project. And Charlie's thinking that he wants to get in my lap. So,
but yeah, it was funny, and you could see when I came back and opened my eyes, Minerva was sort of sitting off to the side with this really irritated look on her face, like my lap. And the funniest thing was, I could feel a weight. Like I could, when she started to poke on the pillow, I realized I was surprised because I had felt like she was already sitting there, because I could feel the weight of a cat sitting on my lap already,
right.
But it was interesting because, yeah, it's nice to get those kind of visits, because it also feels different too once they're gone.
It really did, and I've been able to connect, and it's interesting because the more that left, the easier it was to connect now with all of them. Whereas before I didn't feel that I could, but I know that BC was the first one to connect, and she's the one that just left. And she just was all over me. And she had that new physical freedom that she didn't have. And when it was like, she invited Pequeña back, and Pequeña was like, "Oh my God, how did you do that?" Like BC was teaching her how to come back and connect. And then Buster came in and just knocked them all over. And I was just like,
I can totally see that.
I know.
Very Buster-like.
And they just, it was such joy. It was such a different vibration than I felt from any of them here. Just like when I was around my mother when she passed away. And I felt a joy that came from her that she never experienced when she was here. And knowing her, obviously my entire life. And I think as I'm thinking about this and talking about all this, is that was getting back to their vibration.
Yep. Yes, because they were holding themselves at a vibration in your reality that reflected what you needed to reflect to you.
Right.
Agreement, right?
And the more I started reflecting my own vibration and my own authenticity, the more that vibration was discordant and not necessary anymore.
Right. And so, people like panic when I talk to them about this, because then they're like, does that mean if I'm done with this, that my animal's going to die? And it's like, it can, or not even animal, but like, well, what about relationships? And what about, this? And it's like, well, yes, actually that's happening a lot. And it gives a lot of light if you think about it from this perspective, is every relationship does the same thing. It reflects back to us what it is we need to see within ourselves. Right. So we're often happy to push our crappy stuff onto, like let somebody else represent that for us for a while, right? Like when you start thinking everybody around me has all this drama and they have all this, all this going on. And then you're like, you don't realize that that's because it's still part of you. It's just reflecting back to you. Is there some part of you that still needs that? And so when you do, like, I like the way you're saying that, when you welcome it home, right? When you welcome it in, when you welcome it home as part of you, you don't need that to reflect anymore. So what happens is sometimes, yes, the individual dies, the pet dies, but more often than not, it's like sometimes the relationship completely changes, or the relationship just dissolves altogether because you just don't need that reflection in your life anymore.
Right. Right.
And when especially when, and I feel like it's even more so when it holds us in a certain limiting pattern.
Exactly.
Because if it's a relationship where you're both just sort of in a free place of growth and whatever, and you just, and that's the difference in relationship vibration, is whether it's friends or spouses or lovers or animals or whatever, it's like when we're in this place of, I'm just happy being me and I just am happy of you being you. And, hey, we do stuff together when we need to, and then we don't do stuff together when we don't need to. And then it becomes a free flowing thing. But when you're like, oh, I need you because of this, right?
Right.
Or you talk about somebody being a necessary evil in your life. I hear this all the time, and it's like, yeah, but that's only because you haven't accepted that in within yourself yet.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I can see that, human to human relationships are, both in a place of growth and evolution, independent of each other as well as dependent on each other. Whereas animals seem to come in for such more intense times and be so individually focused, even if it's within a family, that I think that tends to be more the case of, or you lose your pet. Well, that means you're, lose it as in physically lose it to, run away. Or, right. That's their version of being done with what needed to happen there.
Right. Or sometimes the relationship just changes.
Right? Exactly.
Sometimes, and that's the other point too, is it doesn't have to go away. Sometimes the animal changes just in part of its maturity. Sometimes it becomes closer to another person in the family for a while.
Yeah, true.
Or it allows the changes you've changed to accept where you are. Feels like my dog, and I had recognized that she had spent. That was the second iteration in this lifetime of her being my dog.
Mm-hmm.
She's been there, and she's been there as a dog, as a supportive animal, but she's also been there as a person in my life, where she's been like sort of like the support, the person that takes all the crap that you don't want to take, that that sort of takes it away from you so that you don't have to take it on. But
right.
Then take the burden of taking on that crap themselves, and she was with me through a really big period of change in my life, like a big continuous change. Like, when did we take her in? Like 2005, right? So it was before I left corporate. It was when I was starting the herb nursery, and then she was with me through all of the changes since then, right? Which was awesome. And when I, was like having financial issues, and when I was like having relationship issues, with my husband, and just all kinds of stuff, like she was always there, right? And then when I started doing work with clients, she loved to sit in. Why? She loved to sit in the sessions. Why? Because she wanted to take on their stuff energetically.
Take it on.
And how much I had to talk to her. I had to do so much work with her energetically to say, stop taking it on. And I thank you. Just hold space. It's not your job. Just hold the space. This is what I do. We're holding space in love, and then this will all get worked through. This is what they're here for. And that took me, because she would literally get these weird things in her ears. Like suddenly her ears would puff up, and they wouldn't be painful or anything. And I'm like, stop. What are you taking on from my client?
Really having to hear it all.
I know. And so then I finally, I got her to stop doing that. And then I took my practice out of the house for several years, right? And she was so offended when I did that at first, because she's like, well, I'm supposed to help. And I'm like, you know what? How about you just be the dog? Like, you just enjoy your life, be loved and doted on and chill. Like, you've done so much work. You've had such a challenging life. You had a challenging life before you had us. You've been here through so much change for us. And at first it took her a long time to understand that wasn't a demotion, but actually a promotion of,
right.
Be the dog, just be loved. You don't have to do anything, and but she still had this thing. She still wanted to be there for me. And that was the whole thing at the end. And she was, a 70-pound dog that was more than 16 years old. I was like,
right.
She did really well till like the last 6 months, and I was like, go. And she was like, but I want to be here for you. And I was like, I'll be here as long as you want me to. And I'm like, well, then go now, because I just want you to, I don't want you to be like this, I don't want you to be like
Right.
limping around. If you were comfortable, that'd be one thing, but you're just not comfortable anymore, And she had all anxiety. So that's the whole thing. And it was like me, but when I had to let go, when I had to choose, I chose to let go of her, right? Because it was finally, she could barely walk. We had to carry her outside to go to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff. It tore me apart, but then it was also me having to realize that there was a big portion of me to bring back home, as you say. I was like, you know what? I don't need somebody there to pick up those pieces anymore. Like, I don't need to, because there's no pieces to pick up.
Right. Yep.
And it's not like, oh, I can fly on my own now. I've always been able to fly on my own, except now I'm just realizing, it's like that, by the way, those things really were just part of the whole journey, and there was nothing to really pick up.
Right. I'm remembering.
Yeah. Yep. And, and she still comes by, and she'll be by for a couple of days, and then she goes, and, and we're in a year now. But yeah, so that's part of it. Yeah, you're right. This is very specific with animals, often, at least with one, if not all of the family, depending on, the pet.
Right.
But, and people, though, that's another thing too. Like I said, there's a lot of passing on going on. And then what happens is we hold on. A lot of times is what we want to hold on to is and I don't want to, I'm not saying this with any like judgment. What we want to hold on to often is the comfort of what that relationship provided us, so that we didn't have to accept it within ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's probably the hardest thing to get over, is that, and even if you want to call it a distraction, well, I don't need to focus on that because I have this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people feel like, I think that the world is like crumbling around them right now, because all of these things that are externalized are falling away, for them to realize them within themselves and allow that reassimilation in remembrance and consciousness. Because when we do that without judgment, that really shifts things into a completely different level.
Well, and before we always allowed a crumbling to a certain degree, and then, well, we know how to rebuild this. And it's like, oh, but it'll be better this time, and it'll be different, but it's still the same.
Right.
And that it's that finding the joy in doing it different, allowing the crumbling to the point where it really can be different, and it really is different, and that is where the joy is.
Right. And that goes back to doing it differently.
Right.
Which, have we even talked about that on these? Did we? I think we did.
I think we have. I think we have, because that's the basis of everything right now. I feel certain we have.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you when.
No.
But
I have to go back and look at our podcast list and be like, which one was which? I'm not even.
Right.
Well, and this is so interwoven with everything, right? It's so much more interwoven, because doing it differently is the underlying theme, right? Doing this whole existence differently than we've done, and when we've crashed every time, right? Peaked and crashed.
Right.
And so if we truly want to do it differently, then it's every single thing for us to look at and say, how do I do this differently, right? How
right.
How would it be important for me to do this differently as part of the bigger picture, right? And sometimes you don't have to do stuff, because not everything needs to be done differently, but there are some key things. Relationships are a huge one.
Charlie keeps swiveling my chair. Sometimes I think that it's what you see or how you feel about the same thing happening. If you can find the joy in it versus finding the suffering in it or finding the pain in it, that's enough to do it different.
Or the purpose or the lesson, right? To look at it.
Or the forgiveness.
Right. The forgiveness, which has been another theme, right? That was last week.
Right.
F word.
Right. Right. Which I know, I thought that was great. Which I do think is doing it different, is allowing the forgiveness to come in and clean the slate.
Yeah. I mean,
which is doing it different.
True forgiveness, right?
True. Oh, absolutely.
Which is that acceptance of, I recognize not only like, because true forgiveness is really recognizing that something is part of the bigger picture, like how it fit into the bigger picture for me, right, in my reality.
Right.
And to have gratitude for having been there so that I could see it and move past it. Because we don't ever,
right.
like a lot of times we talk about forgiveness and we say, oh yeah, I forget that person, but I never forgot. But part of forgiveness is forgetting, is saying, not forgetting, but actually shifting our place to acceptance and gratitude for saying, thank you for being the message board, because that we set up so that I would see this, because otherwise I wouldn't have, no matter what.
Well, and remembering that it's all perfect.
Yes. And that's a big habit for us to get out of, like into, right? Because I'm saying out of in terms of the conditional forgiveness kind of thing.
Well, and carrying everything forward.
Yes.
Which, you know, you don't know how much you're carrying until you're actually allowed to put it down.
Right. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what's in your closet until you actually have to go through and touch each piece and look at it and say, do I love this or not? To realize that, oh my gosh, I've had all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just such a small representation of everything in your life.
That's true. That's true. And yet, how many of us, I mean, there's so many things in our closets that we just don't even know we still have.
Oh, exactly.
And it is so representative of where we are today, like, and where we're existing, because there are so many things, like you and I know, like all of the active clearing and shifting and resolution work that we've done over the past, decade or whatever you want to call it. Like how many things have come up that you're like, whoa, like I didn't even realize that was there until it came up. And then you're like, oh my God, I can totally feel that. And then it shifted 50 other things because it was laying underneath all these other things. Like it was laying underneath the pile in the closet,
Right, exactly. Or there's a door in the back of the closet that you didn't even know there. That's another closet.
Right. And a whole other set of layers. Right. So, the commitment to allow, because when we just then say, okay, well then how about, like you had done a couple weeks ago, and then we talked about last week, was that, how about I forgive everything, right? How about if I forgive this existence, forgive myself for being a part of it, forgive like everything I judge about it and have judged about it, and accept that it was all perfect, that it is all perfect, and be thankful for being a part of it, because it's actually quite a beautiful, kaleidoscope, right? Or however you want to look at it. It changes the energy so dramatically, and then you can start seeing things with a much clearer perspective,
Mm-hmm.
So where do we go with that? We go back to that reflection. Oh, the relationship thing, because the relationships are a really big topic,
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, even if it's with your animals.
Yeah.
With your home. With your responsibilities.
With your job.
With your roles.
Right.
And because it's like, okay, so we talk about letting go of all the roles. Well, okay, role as a human. Okay, how do I function in the 3D without that? It's like coming to a different place in the relationship with the role.
Right. Well, right, because as we've held them before in the past, the roles have held these boxes around them, right?
Right.
Because every time somebody said, I will take on this role, right? Etherically, they're able to say, well, then in taking on this role, this is what I will reflect back to everybody who looks at me in this role, right?
Right. It comes with X, Y, and Z.
Right. And so that's what and then, by the way, then what happened over the long term was well, I must only be valuable if I hold that box for everybody else by keeping me in that role. And then we externalize the value and realize that no, the value is I can take any role that's needed as part of the kaleidoscope, right? That is perfect as part of the whole symphony. And when we let go of saying, well, no, but I can't do this because I'm in this role and I have to be this, right?
Right.
I have to be a mother. I have to be that, I have to be a spouse. I have to be a sibling. I have to be a best friend or a lover. Like I have to be this. I have to be this role or this job. I've been in this job forever. I might as well, this is what I do, right? This is the role I play in people's lives. And I have a Post-it right here on my computer that says, step away from the role. That's been there since the day, I heard that.
Right.
And it's like, well, when we allow ourselves to say, I am all of this and none of it, like I am what my perfect note is, right?
Right.
And that could be that I'm this role for 5 minutes, and then I'm that role for 10 minutes, and then I'm this role for 3 months, and then this one for, 2 seconds. But that's only because of whatever the note is supposed to, complete.
Well, and it's almost like if you look at the note as the container, and you're going to get in the container with your, did I say note? If the role is the container and you get in with your note, it changes the container.
Yes.
And so it's reversing. It's like the role isn't the defining vibration.
Right.
It's your own note that's the defining vibration, even if it's a role, even if it's a relationship, even if it's, a house, even if it's a job, even if, whatever it is.
And that's how the nature of relationships, as we become more conscious, change, because we stop depending on permanence as being an indicator of the success or failure of the relationship.
Right. It's almost like the growth and the allowance for change, whether the relationship continues under the same definition or not.
Yeah.
Isn't the success or failure.
Yeah. Yes, because when we base and that's a role, like when we base our decisions on what relationship we're in, because and everybody and their brother will say they never do this, but everybody pretty much does at some point in some way, right? So you get into a relationship, whether it's a love relationship or a friendship or a parent child, or it doesn't even matter, right? Then you start making, and even employer employee, same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Work relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
Work relationship. You start to, because of those expected roles that we've created, that we've said, okay, now I must sit in this box, right? Instead of letting myself as the note flow through this while its purpose is there, and not keeping myself not locking myself into it like a safe, right? More like playing it like another note.
Right.
Like, okay, so as long as it serves the higher good or the bigger symphony and the bigger me to play that note, I'll play that note.
Right.
And then when it's time to change that note, then it's time to change that note. And sometimes it's time to change the tone and be a part of a different chord or jump into a different section. So what that all means is how often we sit there and we think, well, I'm really like, and I say this, my husband and I have had this conversation many times, like he'll say, well, I like what I do. I'm really good at what I do. And I'm like, but you like it. You don't love it.
Right. Where's the passion?
And I say, so if you won $1 billion in the lottery tomorrow, would you still go to work? No. The answer without a heartbeat is hell no. And I'm like, then you don't love it.
Right.
And that's a good question for us to ask ourselves is, if you had what you feel like you're lacking, if that person wasn't in your life or whatever, or that thing or the career or the, whatever it reflects back to, if you had what you believe is lacking that relationship or that role fills, would you still want it? Would you still like to have it? And I'm like, I always tell people, if I had $1 billion in the bank, I would still do what I do in some form or another because I love it so much.
Right.
So that's the passion for us to find. But when we say, I can't, and we say it so subtly, the ego says it so softly, it's almost subconscious.
Right.
I have to be in this role. I have to be this kind of wife or this kind of husband or this kind of mother or this kind of father or this kind of child or this kind of employee or this kind of employer, right? I went through, actually, isn't that interesting? What I pushed myself through. Like, I went through leaving corporate after 17 years as a director of a large group, and actually in a really, really valuable role at the time because I played Kevlar for my staff because the person over me was like really, let's just say Godzilla in a very nice way. but very bipolar, and so, and not just that person, but then also senior management, executive management, whatever. As a director, like, that's what I ended up doing. But I stopped liking what I did. I stopped loving what I did because I really didn't want to be in that role. I didn't want to be the Kevlar. It tired me out.
Right.
The bullets for everybody all the time. Just
right.
to get their job done as a global director. And it was like, so I got the position, the paycheck I always wanted, and then I realized, well, this sucks, right? But here's the thing. What does the voice in the back of my head say? But that paycheck.
Right.
And then there's another voice that says, but these people depend on you, meaning my staff, more than anything.
Right.
They were like my children, right? Because I would protect them, or like I would ensure, they had a career path and everything else, like, and sort of hold that space so nobody could, like, come in and interfere with that. And it was so tiring, like holding all that weight, right?
Well, and that self-sacrifice for others.
Yes. Right. But that's how we value ourselves, right? Is, oh, but look at how good of a person I am because I'm doing all this, right? Or people, like, they come home and they're like, oh, I'm so tired of doing this job, but if I don't do it, then this is going to collapse, or these people won't get served, or this won't happen. And it's like, but then maybe it needs to collapse.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I did actually. I set myself a plan because actually the voice was very loud and said, get out, right? Oh, and then on top of it, it was like, at the time I was making twice what my husband made. And it was like, okay, and my kids were about getting into middle school age. And it was like, so you're going to cut your household income by 2/3 by leaving and starting a business. That was in a completely, but the voice was like, get out, get out, get out. And then the ego was going, but.
Right.
Because not only did I play the role of, that manager / parental, like, sort of, like, mentoring thing, right? And protector and all that kind of stuff, and getting the job done. But I did like my job when I was actually able to do it, besides doing the other part. But there's the other voice that says, income, money, bills.
Oh, right.
Supporting your children.
And I mean, I had something similar this past weekend. I mean, we need additional income. We need benefits. We need all these things. And since my husband's self-employed, and it's like, I had several people close to me were like, well, you just need to go to Whole Foods. They have really good benefits. You can look in the vitamin department. And it's like, that doesn't appeal to me in the least. And I felt this overwhelming sense of irresponsibility, and for even feeling that way. Well, you need to make this sacrifice for your family. And I mean, I remember I was in the middle of cooking dinner and I just kept getting madder and madder and madder. And finally and this was all to myself. I just said to myself, you know what? No, that's not my joy. That's not my passion. Now is when I am allowing myself to express as loud as I can my note. And it's not in the vitamin department at Whole Foods.
Well, good. Yeah, good for you. And that's exactly.
And I'm not saying that that's a bad job, and I'm not saying there's no judgment other than it doesn't fit.
There are people that I know at the Whole Foods by me that have been working there since I can remember, right?
Right.
And they love working there. They do. Like, you can tell they're great. They're
right.
Very happy. And so maybe that's their note. That's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I was appalled at myself for even entertaining for the 30, 45 minutes that I did, the obligation to do that.
Right.
And I felt myself getting smaller. I felt myself getting angrier, and I just really felt myself shrinking down. And I was like, no, I am standing up for me.
Yes.
Against me. And that was huge. That was huge for me.
That is huge. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is I can't tell you how many times, and I am actually, I have always said, I'm so, the one thing I am just totally so thankful that my husband has always been is supportive in whatever I did. Because when I decided to go, even though I was cutting the house full in my 2/3 at the time, and I started talking to him about it, and I said, we had bought the property next door, and we started clearing it and putting up the greenhouses, and I said, I could just do this on the side. It was a lot to invest in to just do it on the side. But he goes, you are unhappy. And all that matters is for you to figure out what makes you happy, because we'll figure it out. We'll figure everything else out.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it was tough. It was tough. I mean, that was a hole. What do they call that? A pit. A money pit was what that first business was.
That was weird.
That was weird. Obviously, we needed a ding in there since my phone is turned off.
Right.
But, and that was the whole thing was, you know what? I can't tell you how many times the voices, right? The ego.
Right.
What kind of a loser are you, like, that you would walk away from this job with this pay, and with no, I don't want to say tenure, but basically power in that position, and like what you want to have, blah blah blah. And I'm like, yep, not worth it, not happy. The voice,
right.
Get out, right? So, and I had said, well, I'll try this, and if I don't, I can always go back to what I was doing. It's not a big, it's not a big deal. So, I did the herb nursery. That was the catch pit, and then at that point, I had, when we hit the what do they call it? When we hit that crash in like 2008, then it just really, like, I was just about to get into the black, and everything just fell out from the bottom, and then I went back.
Universe said, nope, it's not what you need to be doing.
It got you out. Now it's time for you to move forward into something else, right? Because then I was like, I thought about going back to corporate for like a week. And I called it, I talked to headhunters, I if I had, in fact, I had some interviews pretty quickly, and I ended up within a couple of weeks, because within like 3 weeks, I had been offered almost the exact same job that I had left at a different company, right? Like, I would just pick up same kind of thing, same pay, same kind of position. And I was sick to my stomach, and even considering it, like my body physically got ill, which was the huge message. Like, yeah, no, nope, and nope, we're not going, no going back, right?
Right.
And But then I started a consulting business that was actually successful, but then the guidance came in to do this. Well, here's the thing. So basically, in a span of when I started doing this full time, January of 2011, right? It's almost 8 years. So from when I left corporate was April of 2006. So in almost 5 years, right? I had the nursery, the consulting business, and then I came to this. So three completely different businesses. And part of the hardest part of letting go, like I cried because there was a part of me that said, no, I committed to this when I did the nursery, right?
Right,
How much money I've committed to this. And how many times have we done that? That was the point I was getting to saying this. Like how many times do we say, well, I've committed all this time and energy and emotion into this relationship, into this job, into this business, into this role, right?
Right.
So like even if I'm getting guidance to change, like am I a failure? Did I fail at that role? Because I'm going to change direction, which then prevents many from changing direction.
Right.
Because then it's this egoic hold of no, if I do that, I'll be a failure, or people will look at me as a failure. And by the way, I still value myself as that role, like that role values me, or I let that role value me. So therefore, if other people think I failed at that role, then I believe that they'll believe that I'm a failure. This is how it all connects, right? So I guess I was prepping myself to be completely fluid because it was just like, and I remember when I started doing this business, my mother had just moved down here like a year and a half before. And she got, I know, it was like, even before I started the business, when I was starting to get prepped to do that, one day we had like this really all out nasty fight that we hadn't had since I was a kid, that kind of level. And I recognized it though. At that point though, I was at this place of consciousness where I could recognize, wow. So obviously I've hit on a really deep trigger, right? A value that I still held about myself, right? Because she said, so you really going to do this woo-woo shit for a living and da-da-da, and like, what does your husband think of this? And you can't see, I mean, it was like every devaluation in the book just came up, and she was just like trying to spit this poison at me. And I was just like, wow. She's like, you left this perfectly good job with a perfectly good paycheck, and stability, and this is going to be your third business. Are you going to ever settle down into something again? And like, oh my God, it was just like venom everywhere,
right?
Judgment. And the thing was, yeah, I got really angry at the time, but because I threw some stuff back at her. But then I walked away. I did actually walk out of that conversation. And after I cried it out and everything else, I was like, actually, because in that conversation, I said, well, yes, I am actually doing this. And by the way, it's none of your business. And by the way, it's none of your business even whether my husband supports me about it or not, which he does, but that's none of your business either.
Right.
Right? So I sort of stood up to that voice, and then I realized in walking away that she was just reflecting something that I had pulled out of the depths of who I was, that I'd been hiding behind the mirrors, right? Of rationalizations and excuses and all this kind of stuff to say, wow, I still believe that this is failure. And that was funny because that was in 2011. That was the last time I changed. So now I've been doing this for almost 8 years, and
as you're saying that, what I'm hearing for myself when I was experiencing well, you should really just go and do this and get benefits for your family and all this kind of stuff, is the piece that I probably haven't fully embraced is the forgiveness of myself for taking this long fighting against my guidance to not sacrifice myself.
Right, because there's the dangling grapes, right? Do you want to sacrifice yourself anymore?
Right, exactly.
Have you really gotten past that?
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back, forgiveness is it needs to start at home with yourself, because that's really the only part that matters.
Yes.
which is what we worked on last week.
Yep. And interesting, because now we've come into this circle of something that came up to me yesterday in meditation. That is like, oh, I guess this isn't going to tie into today's conversation, but it does. Which was because I had noticed, even though like the weekend was really good for me, I had noticed a lot of little, because I have really shifted in this place of like considering and planning out and laying out what I'm going to do next, like starting to really get that momentum going. And there's these little voices I was just observing of, like little tiny blips, right? Of, are you really going to do that? Is that going to be successful, or is it going to waste your time, right? Do you
Well,
really?
and you start clicking into those things where it's like the 3D tries to work its way in. And it's like, well, how do you make money doing that? How does that translate to a paycheck? How does that translate into this abundance that you think you're creating?
Right. And then I realized, here's the tie-in right here. Then I realized, in looking at that and observing those, that it was allowing myself to remember how to be, like, we've been talking about how to be that note, right?
Right.
But it was like, so whether I want to call it Ashanda Ana, that like other part of me, like it was like I didn't remember how to be that 100%.
Right.
Like, and so because of that, because I'm still like resolving all the habits and the egoic valuations that, and even though they're tiny, I mean, tiny little blips that really don't stop me, they're just little bumps, right?
Right.
But it's like there's still shadows of what I've held on to. And maybe that's part of this whole, because basically I ended up doing this, I'm worthy to remember how to and allow myself to be, this person, this next version. We talked about that last week, I think, right? But it was like a different level of that. It was, I remember how to be that completely without, it's like, without having to drag anything forward with me. Like, I can be this completely, in a completely new level, transcendent, not forgetting about it, being transcendent, but back to that transcendence versus dissolution, right?
Right.
And there was something that just felt really different about it. What was the other thing that we had texted about? Because that felt really different too, because you said it felt like a different level of something we was.
Oh, that was Saturday, I think.
Um,
Transcendent judgment individually, collectively, and being fully realized as that note, regardless of where we are and what we choose to understand.
Yeah.
Oh, that was coming back together with the equal and opposite of yourself.
Yes.
And I said, which all results from forgiveness of yourself for everything, ultimate self-love.
Right. So it's all of that.
This is, I mean, it's like, it sounds like we're talking about all these different things, but it's almost like,
No, it's the same thing.
It's all part of the same.
And the thing that came to me yesterday that was important, though, the element is that I realized when I looked 100% honestly at myself and like listening to those little blips and bumps, that I wasn't quite sure that I remembered how to be that, how to be all of that without those bumps. Like actually knew how to do it.
Right. And you just said something that really almost took my breath away when you said how to be all of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's because we've been so limited here.
Yes.
It's how do we allow that expansion and that volume of remembering And then you said without all those little bumps, well, the little bumps are what create that fear,
Right.
because without it, it all just flows.
Right. And when you, yeah, it's so whole though, right?
Yeah, it feels great.
It does.
It's like putting down that whole set of luggage.
Putting down the whole canyon you've been carrying along with.
Right, right.
Yes. Oh my God, that reminds me. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Remember back when, yeah, because when I just said that, that was interesting. Remember back when what's his face? Robin Williams had come to me after he
Oh
died
yeah, yeah,
with the whole
yeah.
canyon. And that's what I saw with him was he was like and he was like, what am I supposed to do? And I was like, I think you need to go through the canyon. Get through it.
Mm.
You know, because that's where all the cracks and crevices and the shadows and the light are, you know, and when we're carrying it as something, there is something really important about that, you know, as we just put it down and it just flows differently. God, I can't even find the words. That's the challenge I'm having. Is like,
Right, right.
and let's just stay with the feeling of it because the feeling
Yeah,
of wholeness is to remember how to do it that way, how to be that way. Because we talk about like, okay, yeah, I am this way, and you know, I am this, and all that kind of stuff. But if we don't remember how to do it, how to actually act it out, beyond all the little habits we still have in place, right? That,
beyond all the words.
yeah, beyond the words, beyond, yes, physicalities.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, it's right. Yeah, there's the point. I knew we would get to it.
Yeah, because yeah.
I have no idea.
Oh yeah.
I have no idea how we got here, but that was the important place to get to.
Yeah, I may have to re-listen to track it back.
To our conversation. All right. Well, let's take a bio break. Quick. I'm going to put this on pause, and then we'll come back and do this. All right. So let's go do all that, shall we?
Yeah, all of that.
Allow.
Remember,
Remember.
forgive.
Accept. Yep. And everything else that doesn't have words. Let's go do that. You ready?
Yep. Yep.
I could have stayed up there all day on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I kept on going, oh, kept on going, yeah, come back. Oh, just another minute. Just a little while longer. It was one of those, it took a while to get to that place, but I kept on seeing all these things like start to fold in, like these little things. I can't even explain it better than that because there were things that they were these realizations. Oh, look at what that was reflecting back to me, like, and it was like sort of embracing it all, like allowing it to come in and I, recognizing that the death of a relationship or a person or whatever that we mourn, like it's all stuff that we are, like a lot of times how deep it goes is how uncomfortable we are accepting that back in, so it was like, nope, accepting all of it, embracing it. And I was watching it all just sort of melt in together. And I saw some other stuff, but at the end, it just got bigger and bigger because then it was all collective. And then it was like pieces and parts of these things that we hold up and we keep as separate as history and historical things that we, believe or we judge in some way. And it was like, yeah, and it was just like one thing. And the more that became embraced, the bigger it felt. Like it just was like this ever expanding ripple out of expansion. It was, it felt so good. And it was easy.
Yeah. That the main visual that I got was, as you're trying to propel yourself forward, for lack of a better word, in what you do every day, it seemed that it was easier to shut out all stimulus with the exception of vibration and just allow that to pull you in whatever direction, because sometimes the things that are the direction you need to go aren't even visual to you.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's almost like coming through a thing of smoke and there's your answer. But you would have selected that as a choice because of the smoke, because you couldn't see it.
Because you were depending on something. Yeah.
Right. And it just felt so freeing to just allow that vibration to pull you through to whatever direction you need that was.
Nice. Oh, very nice. Wow. Another fabulous discussion.
Really good.
So everybody sit on that this week. We always laugh at that at the end of the day. It's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. This week is spring. And enjoy the week, and we'll see you next time on Ascended World. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg, Avignone.
see you next time.
Bye.